Just before I bring Jason McCartney in, can I say to you, with 9 speakers to get in, and I'm intending to bring the front benches on at 20 to 4, so that leaves us 30 minutes, so if we could have as much discipline as possible, I want to ensure that everybody is called. Jason McCartney.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I would like to add my congratulations to the Backbench Committee for securing this debate, the Honourable Member for Coventry North West, the Honourable Member for Foyle for his contribution just before, and also my honourable friend over here, oh, he's just gone, for Bracknell, who had very thoughtful, insightful and a very revealing speech indeed. I'd also like to thank all the victims and loved ones who are up in the gallery of this scandal, and many of you have been here since 10:30, as I have this morning. Thank you for your patience, and I hope that the time you've spent there will be worthwhile in just an hour's time. Mr Speaker, debates like this are what I was elected for. I am passionate about this issue, and I'm determined that we should stop dragging our heels and begin the process of closure to this shocking scandal. As most of us here know, this scandal was caused by the importation of Factor 8 from the United States, where blood was extracted from prisoners for money by commercial companies. It was not properly sterilised and treated before being used in British hospitals in the treatment of haemophiliacs. There were several chances for the governments of the day to act over the years, but they missed every time. Again and again, the victims of this scandal have been betrayed. Already, 1,800 of the 4,800 British haemophiliacs that were affected have died, and of the 1,243 people who contracted HIV, only 345 are still alive today. It's the human tragedies that are the feature of this shocking scandal. I've only had a general awareness of this scandal for a few years, but it was only when I met an amazing man from Lindley in the north of my constituency that it really hit me. And I have to admit, I have been emotionally drawn into this issue. Mr C, he wishes to remain anonymous, was dignified and polite. As a 12-year-old, as a haemophiliac, he was injected with these dirty blood products. And at the age of 12, he was injected with HIV and hepatitis C. Now, he's still alive, thanks to his positive outlook, but he's also helped by a cocktail of drugs. He has no anger, no bitterness, just a desire to get some fairness, mainly for his family. And it's also worth remembering that many of these victims were already suffering from other illnesses or had suffered an accident before they were infected with these contaminated blood products. And for too long, for too many decades, this issue has been swept under the carpet. Now, I came into Parliament to do the right thing and to stand up for those that have been wronged, and many of them are up in the gallery now. I'm not going to get bogged down by the intricacies and the financial commitments of the Archer report. I know, as many of us do, there is little money left, which just adds to my indignation that this wasn't cleared up in better times. And in fact, I have to praise my government for their action over the previous 13 days, which has done a lot more than in the previous 13 years. I'm immensely proud of what has happened in the last 24 hours, the movement that has been made by the Minister on the front bench here, and I also welcome a number of the recommendations in the ministerial statement which I saw this morning. However, I'm going to put my notes down now, because I did say I've been emotionally drawn into this issue, and I'm going to address the many people up in the gallery and look them in the eye. I came into this debating chamber as a Member of Parliament to do the right thing. For too long you have suffered, your families have suffered, you have been the victims of this scandal, and I hope I can do the right thing, the members here can do the right thing, and so I will be supporting the motion later. Thank you.
Damian Hinds.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm conscious that there are many honourable members still wishing to speak, and we will be brief and quick in our words. As the Right Honourable Member for Coventry North West mentioned in his opening remarks, with the number of people involved in this scandal, it's all but inevitable that in every constituency there will be someone who has been affected. But the issue has a special significance in my constituency of East Hampshire because of being home to the outstanding Lord Mayor Treloar College, where so many of the victims were students in the 1970s and 80s on account of the excellent haemophilia centre that was there in-house. My constituent, Mr Adrian Goodyear, himself one of those infected by contaminated blood and blood products, wrote to me, "We've now lost so many of our friends from the Trelaw days. In fact, we stopped counting at 40, many of whom were children or teenagers or young adults at the time." Those words will stay with me. I'd like to pay tribute to all the tireless campaigners from the affected community for their perseverance and tenacity over many years, and I congratulate them and everybody who's been involved in securing this historic debate on the floor of the House of Commons. Honourable members from across the political spectrum have also been instrumental in keeping up the fight, and among them was my predecessor as East Hampshire's MP, Michael Mates, for whom this was a particular special cause. I, like most of us, can't begin to imagine the anguish and the fury of the thousands of patients infected by contaminated blood. And whether we call it accident or negligence or anything else, these people came to receive treatment through our National Health Service and were poisoned. For some, it's been a death sentence. For others, a long, lingering life sentence. There are things in this morning's written statement which are certainly to be welcomed, including the commitment from the Minister to look afresh at the questions of insurance, prescription charges and access to care services and nursing. Many honourable members have spoken about the compensation aspect, and of course that is fundamental. It's become clear to me through this debate that today's motion, as currently worded, is not the very best basis on which to move forward, for the reasons espoused by the Honourable Member for Hammersmith and the Honourable Member, my right honourable friend, the Member for Charnwood. But we do all look to the Minister to find and to move forward towards a just settlement that allows these people who have suffered so much and their families to reach some sort of closure. In about 30 seconds, I want to focus on a different aspect, which is that of apology. One of the worst parts of this whole sad affair is that so many, including those children from Trelaws, died without anybody saying, "We are sorry." That makes me very uncomfortable. It's not about assigning blame. There could be, indeed there has been, long debate over the technicalities of liability or otherwise, who knew what and when, how quickly things could have changed and moved on and so on. But regardless, Mr Deputy Speaker, of the specifics of that debate, surely the victims of this disaster are due the dignity of a proper apology. I've read the expressions of sympathy, but I don't think it's quite far enough. The events predate most, in fact, of the members of this House, and I'm not suggesting that a minister come to the dispatch box to take or indeed assign blame. But I do think that it's not too much to ask that the victims should have the dignity of being able to hear a Minister of the Crown come to the floor of this House and say, "Yes, we are truly sorry."
Caroline Dinenage.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I would also like to reiterate some of the people that have already spoken this afternoon and say how much I appreciate this opportunity to have this debate today. To my mind, it is a debate that should have happened many, many years ago. I would also like to reiterate what has already been expressed and pay my tribute to the victims and their families that are watching this debate today. The tragedy of contaminated blood is undoubtedly one of the biggest medical disasters in the history of the NHS. It is important to establish how this medical catastrophe was allowed to happen and to protect those whose lives were decimated as a result. I recently met with a delegation of people who had suffered at the hands of the Equitable Life disaster, and while I have absolutely every sympathy with their plight, this debate today puts that matter into perspective, because what we're talking about is not the loss of life savings, it is the loss of life. It is the loss of livelihood, it is the loss of a chance to grow old, to become a parent and to see your children grow up. It would seem to me wholly appropriate that people whose lives have been decimated by this disaster must be fairly compensated. And after all the discussions we've heard today about how much that will cost, I very much look forward to hearing the Minister speak later about whether this is affordable. However, I don't think the relatives are purely after money. As George Santayana said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it, and that is why it is so important that this debate is happening, as it ensures the tragedy is not forgotten, and with the help of Lord Archer's recommendations, is not repeated. One of those affected was from my constituency of Gosport, a haemophiliac who had just a 10-day window of NHS treatment for his condition, just 10 days that proved to be his death sentence, as he was infected with both HIV and hepatitis C. This man suffered in every single way as a result of his infection. He lost the chance to father children, to further his career. He suffered pain, humiliation, poverty, prejudice, and ultimately death. His family lived a lie to avoid the stigma of HIV and were therefore cut off for the possibility of much needed support from friends and neighbours. His stepdaughter talks of a lost childhood. Such was, and in many cases still is, the fear and prejudice towards HIV that sufferers I've met who were open about their illnesses experienced homes daubed with red paint and children hounded from their schools. This man's family suffered financial hardship. Unable to get life assurance, his widow was left not only a single mother, but with a mortgage to pay. He died on Christmas Eve 1998 at the age of just 40. He died of a life-threatening condition and 3 terminal diseases. He died struggling not just against his illness, but against huge financial worries, fear for the future of his family, and under the oppressive burden of injustice. Now, 12 years later, his widow is still fighting against this injustice. She talks of her fight against the sense that somehow this man's life, her husband, didn't count, because no government seemed to care. Her simple desire is to not wake up every single morning of her life and think of this. She talks of the frustrating myths which prevail here. One of these is that victims were compensated. The truth is that the Skipton Fund drew a line in the sand, an arbitrary date in 2003, after which relatives of people who died were given a small ex gratia payment. My constituent died in 1998. His widow was told that her husband died 5 years too early. To her mind, he died 45 years too early. Here today in the House, we have a fantastic opportunity. The contaminated blood tragedy has finally been granted a platform, and we as elected members have a responsibility over the coming months to ensure that we fight for a just outcome for the tainted blood community. This small community of sick, bereaved and dying people, lots of whom are living in poverty. This tiny community will go on fighting no matter what the outcome today, and we as parliamentarians should feel humbled by their bravery and take up the fight on their behalf. Martin Luther King once said, "When you are forever fighting a degenerating sense of nobodiness, then you will understand why we find it hard to wait." This is how this little community goes on, waiting and dying, dying and waiting. Whatever happens in the vote today, we must ultimately put an end to this. No amount of money can bring back those who've suffered and died. The dead will remain dead, their losses will remain lost. But we can help them to shed the burden of injustice, to regain financial security. My hope is that my constituent will one day again be able to wake up in the morning knowing that each day is a day to be loved, a day to be lived, and not a day to be fought.